guess to pivot towards my community work with the Blasian March. I definitely have to give a shout out to the Filipinx queer and femme organizers in Chicago, with whom I learned, or from whom I learned about collaborations through organizing and activism, because a lot of the Filipinx organizing in Chicago was really intersectional and really, we're showing up for Black communities, we're showing up for, other Latinx communities, we're showing up for everybody. Looking back, I definitely recognize, the Blasian March is rooted in Filipino organizing, it's rooted in Filipino political movement. So it takes that, and it also takes a branch of organizing I've seen amongst Black trans community members here in New York City. So last year, when we saw the mass wave of Black Lives Matter, here in New York, there were several offshoot movements where a lot of folks felt that, because mainstream media, white mythology, has taken Black Lives Matter and twisted it in a way that creates a singular narrative, a very specific narrative of, this movement only relates to policing and police violence towards cis-het, able-bodied Black men, when Black Lives Matter was founded by 3 women, 2 of whom are queer, and it is really supposed to address every form of Black life and affirm Black life in all of its capacities or contexts. So I noticed, because, Black women were feeling excluded, Black trans folks, Black queer folks are feeling excluded, Black disabled folks are feeling excluded, you saw all these little smaller movements popping up. So you would have Black Women's March, you would have Stonewall protests, Black Disabled Lives Matter protests, and all that was kind of sitting for me. Particularly what really catapulted me into forming the Blasian March was an incident last year when I was stepping more into Asian organizing and was collaborating with some East Asian men who were cishet, and I was the only Black person on the team, I was the only visibly queer person on the team, and the day of the action my safety was compromised. And for me, I had decided that the healing process was just to do my own action the way I felt. On one, because a lot of that for me was like, well, if I'm going to be organizing in Asian communities, I can't divorce my Asianness from my Blackness, right? Very clearly, my Filipino roots, she married a Scottish man, had my ancestor Ronald Dash, who then married into a Black family. Or both of my Chinese great-grandfathers married Black women. So for me, it's like, I cannot, to myself, divorce the two. That would be a disservice to me, and that would be a disservice to my heritage. So in those organizing spaces, I was very much like, okay, I love that we're empowering Asian communities, but how does this tie into, solidarity with Black communities? So after that moment where my safety was compromised, I connected with a collective of Asian American femme organizers, and we held space, and that's when I realized, my healing process is to do my own march, is to do my own thing, bringing both sets of community together my way. And so the Blasian March was hatched, conceived of, born,
So can you talk about, that's a big leap. It's a big leap to, be meditating with your cohort about what you were experiencing, to then creating a huge march. Like that's it, right? I mean, so can you just talk about the steps that, how you came to, what it was like for you to organize the march the first time?
Oof! Okay, organizing the first Blasian March was, now that I've got a little more experience, it was many funny stories now. So I guess while holding space with the Asian American femmes, you know, when we were talking, it turns out that a lot of us were sharing stories of harm from these specific East Asian men, these particular individuals. And, you know, for me, it suddenly became we have been pushed to the side. We as femmes, we as Black Asians or disabled folk in Asian communities and Black communities, you know, we're constantly pushed to the side. We're constantly silenced. And the fact that these women or the femmes were just like, it was story after story after story of just harm. It was just so frustrating to me, where I was just like, why are we being silent like this? So for me, it was like, okay, for this action, this will be a space that will directly give the mic to these women. That will be like, we have been silent for too long. This space is for you to be heard. I am giving you the mic to say what you want to say. And so that was kind of like the few steps I kind of realized. I was like, oh, I think I need to do my own action. So early planning was, interestingly enough, borrowing a lot of skill sets I had developed in the past. So when I was in Chicago, I was working for a theater company doing their marketing. They fired me, and that's why I moved to New York. So, you know, using 4 years of a marketing background, I was like, okay, what can I borrow from this and put it into my work with the Blasian March? Great. I know that when I was promoting an event, it was like, oh, on social media, this strategy was very effective. Let's use this strategy for the Blasian March. Let's do all the things. For me, it was also, since I had experienced harm based on safety, that was also kind of one of my bigger, like, I need to center safety for this space, because if we're gonna have femmes, queer, trans folk, disabled folks, the folks who are most targeted by state violence, sanctioned or unsanctioned, then safety should really be top priority. And coincidentally enough, at the action where my safety was compromised, the lead is Filipino, Filipinx, Galian Mendoza, and they were like, oh, how can I support you? How can I help this process? So I was like, well, I kind of want to do my own sort of like Black Asian solidarity thing. Do you want to help me do safety? And they were like, of course! And so it was interesting seeing how the Blasian March centered, you know, not just the most marginalized, it centered safety. In many ways, it centered and continues to center my ancestry. I definitely noticed a lot of Filipino queer and femme folks are in the crowd, or are in attendance, or helping with the organizing in the background. The last two Blasian marches, we had Filipino percussion marching with us. Yeah, I think those kind of been the pillars of the Blasian March, centering healing and safety, centering the most marginalized within the marginalized, and centering ancestry.